The golden crone received Jonathan like a room that had been warned of his name. Conversation thinned to a thread, and even the fire seemed to listen. Jonathan smiled, and every face looked away. A small hand caught Jonathan's at the stair. The innkeeper's wife, eyes brimming with folk sorrow, pressed a rosary into his palm as if plugging a breach in a ship. For the night, she whispered, and for the road beyond night. In Jonathan's narrow room he read the Count's letter, a map written in politeness, yet the candle guttered as though the script exhaled cold. Business drew him onward, unease merely kept pace. Before the sun earned its color, a small crowd gathered like a prayer without words. They crossed themselves as Jonathan climbed the carriage, as if blessing a man already in the past. The road unspooled into pines and legend. Behind them the village bells dwindled, ahead, the mountains threaded the day with darker thread. Evening set the sky like a seal, red, official, irreversible. The wind spoke in a language that made the horses listen. Where the cliff pressed close, the night found its courage. A chorus rose from the ravines, wolves tuning their hunger to our passage. He appeared as if appointed by the dark itself, tall, spare, without hurry. Our driver yielded the reins, and the night settled deeper by a measurable degree. The road dropped into gulfs of vapor, and the wheels spoke in hollow syllables. Jonathan felt the altitude like an opinion pressing upon the chest. The halls gave Jonathan footfalls back to him, and he understood how a man might be multiplied into loneliness. Jonathan dismounted before iron gates that swung wide with no visible summons, as if the hinge obeyed the rumor of him. He stood at the threshold, lamp held like a bright lie. His courtesy was perfect, only his silence had edges. The halls gave Jonathan footfalls back to him, and he understood how a man might be multiplied into loneliness. Jonathan dined, Dracula did not. His eyes kept the table better than any servant, and Jonathan ate as one interviewed by the dark. Faces of the dead held court upon the walls, warriors, judges, ancestors with the Count's profile distributed among them like a debt of bone. Morning made Jonathan reckless, the razor made him bleeding. At the sight, his host moved with a speed that canceled reason. Later Jonathan looked for his reflection as a man looks for an alibi. The castle offered none. Jonathan tried each door that had welcomed him the night before. In the morning they honored a different allegiance. The bolts spoke a language Jonathan did not. Near midnight Jonathan saw him pass his window, head downward, hands like hooks, descending the sheer face of the castle as a lizard might negotiate a leaf. The moon looked smaller for it. Jonathan wrote then with the steadiness of a man crossing ice, each word a footstep. I am a guest only by courtesy, in truth I am inventory. They entered as perfume might, seen only after felt, three beauties overlaid with famine. Their laughter took small bites from the air. The Count arrived with a winter in his face. This man is mine, he said without speaking, and the room understood him. The world narrowed to the sound of Jonathan's own name falling away from him. Then even that went out. The castle kept its own kind of quiet. Oh, a great wooden crate bound in heavy chains. None dare linger near it, for they feel the weight of an unseen evil sealed inside. Dark clouds gather over the sea, lightning splitting the heavens. The storm swells, as if summoned by a will darker than nature itself. The captain's lifeless body hangs lashed to the wheel. Lightning flashes across his hollow face. His vigil ended. Yet he stares into eternity. In the darkness of the hold, boxes lie shattered and open. From them swarm hordes of rats, fleeing as if pursued by something far worse. The Demeter groans as the waves batter her hull. Wind screams through the rigging, and the ship staggers like a wounded beast in the night. The crew fight desperately against the storm's fury. Their eyes betray more than fear of the sea, they dread the cursed presence hidden among them. On the rain-soaked deck, shadows slither and stretch. The crew see nothing, yet sense they are not alone. Something evil walks among them unseen. Through the roar of the storm, a terrible crash splits the dawn. The Demeter shatters upon the rocks of Whitby. The sound echoes across the harbor, and alarm spreads as townsfolk cry out, rushing toward the shore. Onlookers rush across the sands, shouting in alarm. They gather at the wreck, yet no soul remains alive aboard, only silence and dread. From the shattered deck, a monstrous wolf hurls itself onto the shore. The townsfolk recoil, crossing themselves as the beast disappears into shadow. The wolf rises on its hind feet, walking upright as man, the creature's form twisting, half wolf, half man. Cloaked in black, it strides into Whitby streets, the Count himself, walking among the living. In her quiet chamber, Mina trembles as she reads the account of the Demeter's doom. A shadow of dread settles over her heart. The morning sun painted the sea in fire and gold as Mina and Lucy strolled the cliffs. Shadows stretched long, and an unseen dread stirred in the salt wind. That night, the moon summoned Lucy from her bed. Like a pale phantom, she drifted across the grass, gown glowing as if woven from moonlight itself. In the churchyard silence, the shadow of Dracula bent low. His crimson eyes glimmered as he sank his fangs into Lucy's throat, sealing her fate beneath the stars. Mina, faithful and trembling, wrapped Lucy in her shawl, unaware of the evil wound pulsing beneath her friend's delicate skin. Meanwhile, in the asylum, Dr. Seward studied his patient, Renfield. The man's ravings grew sharper, his madness circling ever closer to a terrible truth. Renfield scuttled in the shadows, snatching flies with feverish delight. He whispered to himself, a servant awaiting his master's command. Mina begged Lucy to eat, but the young woman turned away, her lips rejecting earthly sustenance, hungering for something darker. The wound on Lucy's neck deepened, 2 punctures hidden beneath lace and ribbon. A secret signature of the Count, feeding slowly upon her life. Far away, a letter arrived from Budapest. Jonathan was alive, but his words trembled with fear, hinting at horrors locked in memory. In the quiet halls of the convent, gentle hands tended Jonathan's broken body. His eyes remained haunted, as if some part of him still wandered Dracula's halls. Despite the shadows, Mina and Jonathan were wed, binding their hearts together. Yet beneath their vows, the shadow of Dracula loomed, unbroken. Late at night, Jonathan whispered to Mina the name he feared most. Dracula. The word itself was poison, and a vow of vengeance yet to come. She lies pale beneath the fading light, her breath thin as silk. Mina sits close, holding her hand, watching helplessly as the night deepens. Love turns to fear as Lucy's pulse fades, and something unseen steals her strength. Van Helsing draws back the lace from Lucy's throat. Two small wounds glisten faintly beneath the lamplight, delicate, yet dreadful. He whispers, "This is no common sickness, this is the mark of something unholy." Arthur, Seward, and Morris stand silently around her bed. Their faces pale, their hearts breaking. They see the woman they love slipping away, and they know no medicine of man can save her now. Arthur offers his own blood. The crimson lifeline flows from his arm into Lucy's, and color returns to her cheeks for a moment. He smiles in relief, not knowing he's feeding more than the living. A low wind rises from the moors. Then comes the howl, long, mournful, inhuman. The wolves answer one another in the dark, as though rejoicing in a secret only the dead understand. Across calm waters, Mina sails home. But she feels the chill of something unseen, a shadow that followed her across the sea. England's shores draw near, but peace does not. Lucy clutches her rosary, lips moving in silent prayer. The crucifix gleams faintly in the gloom. Her eyes flutter, caught between dreams and death, as the night presses close around her. Glass shatters. Curtains whip. A monstrous wolf bursts through the window in a storm of wind and snow. Its eyes burn like embers, and when it's gone, Lucy's wounds bleed anew. Days later, her tomb lies open. A pale light glows within. Lucy rests there, untouched by decay, her beauty flawless, her lips red as fresh blood. Van Helsing's voice trembles. She is not at rest. Torches flare beneath the cold churchyard moon. Van Helsing stands before the others. "Gentlemen," he says, "the woman we knew as Lucy Westenra is gone. What remains, walks by night. She appears, radiant and terrible, eyes burning with hunger. Arthur," she whispers, voice sweet as sin, "come to me." The air chills. Beauty has become death itself. Van Helsing lifts the crucifix high. The golden light strikes Lucy's face. She screams, retreating into the shadows. Smoke curls from her lips as he whispers, "Peace will come, even for her." In the fog-shrouded graveyard, Lucy Westenra moves like a wraith, her lips red as roses, her eyes glowing faintly with hunger. Children follow her laughter through the mist, drawn by a sweetness that hides the serpent beneath. Van Helsing, Seward, and Arthur stand before the iron gate of the Westenra tomb. Torches flicker. The air is heavy with dread, yet in their hearts burns a terrible duty. Within the vault, Lucy lies pale as marble, yet her chest rises with breath not her own. Her beauty, unearthly, her smile, a silent mockery of life. "Back, creature of the night," he thunders, holding high the sacred cross. Its light cuts through the gloom, a burning reminder of heaven's power against the damned. Lucy recoils, hissing, her face twisting with fury and despair. The glow sears her pallid skin, then fades, leaving only a shuddering silence. Arthur steps forward, trembling. Her voice, soft, pleading, calls his name. But Van Helsing's hand on his shoulder reminds him, this is not the woman he loved. When all is done, Lucy lies peaceful once more, her lips pale, her eyes closed in true rest. The monster is gone. Only the memory of love remains. They seal the tomb with sacred wafers and the sign of the cross. Van Helsing draws a crimson sigil in blood and wax, a warning to any who would trespass the dead. Under the rising moon, Van Helsing kneels by the grave. He whispers a prayer for Lucy's soul, and vows to hunt the source of all this evil. Far away, Jonathan Harker stares into the hearth. The smoke curls upward, and within its shape, he sees the Count's face smiling back at him. Pins and strings mark the trail of the Count across London. Every dot a victim, every line a shadow. The hunt is no longer for one vampire, but for the darkness spreading through the city itself. By lamplight, Jonathan and Mina pore over the maps together. Fear flickers in their eyes, but so does courage. The hunt has begun, and the night is far from over. Met Jonathan again on English soil, thinner, shaken, but alive. His voice trembled as he spoke of the Count, and her embrace was less joy than relief that he had not been lost to the dark. Across the street, unseen by most, a black shape scaled the brick face of a building like a hunting spider, cloak pressed to stone, eyes burning, moving with no sound and no human weight. Jonathan worked with a strange fury in the dim storeroom, prying open earth-filled crates and driving stakes into them as if wounding the rooms themselves, each strike a vow that the Count would not rise again. Quincy stood watch in the alley, rifle low, breath fogging in the lamplight, the American still as a coiled beast, listening for hoof, wing, or footfall of the thing they hunted. Then, a brush of cold wind, and the Count passed them in the street in gentleman's guise. Jonathan froze. Mina felt her soul recoil, though she could not name why. By lamplight Jonathan traced deeds, transfers, and sealed contracts, following Dracula not by blood nor shadow, but by ink and property, the map of a predator nesting in lawful paper. In the asylum a cry split the corridors, Renfield at the bars, eyes wide with supernatural dread, shrieking to the night as though something unseen pressed its face against the glass. They found him shaking, whispering and gasping. The master came again, the blood, the night, his shaking in terror not of punishment but of devotion betrayed. Moments later he lay broken, crucifix by his side. Renfield had dragged his body into the sun's rays streaming through his sewered asylum window. His arm burning to dust in the sun's rays, yet even dying he gazed upward with an expression of peace, as though he had found the redemption he sought. In the guest room Dracula bent Mina backward over his chest, her face white with horror as he pressed her lips to his open vein. Mina's eyes glowed crimson red like Dracula's, his mark on her forehead binding her life to his in blasphemous communion. The men burst in like thunder, to confront the monster, their torches and crucifixes light filling the dark room, steel drawn, scripture on their breath, their courage burning against the unnatural stillness of the vampire lord. Dracula's eyes burned crimson red in anger. Cornered, the Count dissolved, his undead flesh thinning into vapor, and he streamed between cracks and sill gaps like cold smoke, fleeing not in defeat, but in patience. The hunters were confused by his disappearance. Mina sat in silence as moonlight traced the scarlet brand upon her brow, a mark left by the Count himself. It pulsed faintly, like a living seal, binding her will to his. In the mirror, she saw not her reflection, but the faint shimmer of crimson veins beneath her skin, whispering the word host. The room dimmed as Mina's breath slowed. A red aura wreathed her form, soft at first, then flaring with unseen command. Her eyes opened but did not see. Words not her own formed upon her lips, echoing in two voices, hers, and another's that traveled through the storm. In the flickering light of a single candle, Jonathan's hands worked without pause. Each stake he carved carried the weight of love and vengeance. His jaw was set, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights, a man reforged by loss, preparing for what could never again be called mercy. Dr. Seward bent over his maps, tracing paths with trembling fingers. Lines of ink became arteries of fate, railroads, roads, and rivers leading north. His every calculation was haunted by the thought that they were not chasing a man, but a storm-wearing human shape. Dr. Seward bent over his maps, tracing paths with trembling fingers. Lines of ink became arteries of fate, railroads, roads, and rivers leading north. His every calculation was haunted by the thought that they were not chasing a man, but a storm-wearing human shape. The hunters gathered around the fire, its glow painting their faces in copper and shadow. Mina sat apart, her gaze fixed beyond the flames. None spoke of the mark, though all had seen it. The night carried a silence heavier than words, a truce between courage and despair. Far across the channel, the Count moved unseen among the crew. Cloaked in mist and menace, he took his place aboard the vessel that would bear him eastward. The harbor lights dimmed as if fearing to witness him depart. Behind him, the water shimmered red as spilled memory. By lantern glow, the hunters traced the ship's progress across parchment. Each mark of ink bled outward, like veins spreading through the page. The red line curved toward Varna, then inland to the Carpathians. Mina's hand hovered above it, trembling, as though she could feel him calling. The wheels clattered like a heartbeat through the night. Mina sat by the window, watching her reflection flicker with each passing light. Sometimes it smiled when she did not. Sometimes its lips moved though hers were still. The air around her smelled faintly of earth and decay. Across the plains they rode, their silhouettes cut by moonlight. Wind tore at their cloaks, but none slowed. They were no longer men chasing evil, they were witnesses to the world's oldest hunt. Behind them lay reason, before them only faith sharpened into purpose. In the small hours before dawn, Van Helsing arranged the relics upon a stone table, crucifixes, wafers, the host, vials of sanctified water. His hands moved reverently, as if touching instruments of war and prayer alike. He fears only the pure, he whispered, for purity cannot be corrupted. Night split open above the Carpathians. Lightning crowned the distant fortress where Dracula waited. Mina stood at the train window, her eyes drawn toward the storm's pulse. The mark on her forehead burned anew, a summons, a bond, a prophecy. The hunt was nearing its end. From the treeline came a blur of shadow and teeth, a wolf with eyes like coals. It struck and vanished before steel could rise, dissolving mid-leap into a swarm of wings. In that single instant, the hunters felt not an enemy in retreat, but a predator choosing when to feed again. Mina sat rigid beneath Van Helsing's hand, her breath thin as silk. Her voice emerged in slow fragments, describing places her eyes had never seen. He travels, northeast, over water, beneath a low star. Each word sounded borrowed, as though spoken through her rather than by her. The chase resumed before dawn, by ship, by horse, by rail. At times they felt ahead of him, at times hopelessly behind. Every mile carried a double weight, distance closed, and time surrendered. They hunted not only a vampire but the hour when Mina would be lost. Van Helsing and Mina ascended the high pass as light bled into the sky. The wind cut like iron across the ridge. Behind them lay the world of men, ahead, the realm of the infected and the damned. Dawn painted the snow gold and red, as if foretelling blood and consecration. Along the path, Van Helsing uncorked a vial of sacramental wine and poured it upon the soil. Steam rose where it touched. "We sanctify the road before evil claims it," he murmured. The earth hissed like a living thing recoiling from an older authority. He pressed sigils into the dust, circles, crosses, and written charms drawn from forgotten rites. Mina watched in silence as each mark shimmered faintly, as though acknowledging their purpose. The wind moved around the symbols but did not cross them. Then came the sound, a rush like wind through bone. A storm of bats poured across the sky, circling above them. Mina fell to her knees, whispering scripture not in fear but in defiance. The swung thin at the sound of prayer, as if burned by words alone. Deeper in the past they found remnants, torn veils, jewelry blackened by time, footprints that ended without direction. The air carried perfume and rot in equal measure. Van Helsing did not name them aloud, but Mina knew. The brides wandered close. Night returned as they neared the fortress. Through a fissure in the stone they saw red light pulsing upward from the crypt below, not fire, but something older, steady as a heartbeat. The castle itself seemed to breathe with it. Van Helsing descended the carved steps, candle in hand. Each tread echoed like a tolling bell. The stone walls narrowed, carved with marks not meant for human eyes. The deeper he went, the more the air felt inhabited, as though something waited with its eyes closed. Before the final arch lay a panel of stone etched with roses strangled by bat wings. Petals and fangs shared the same root, beauty grafted to corruption. Van Helsing traced the emblem with his thumb, reading in it a truth: this evil did not invade, it was planted. Outside, the sky bled into the last light of day. The fortress rose black against a red horizon, as if crowned by the dying sun. Mina watched it without blinking. The mark on her brow pulsed an answer, not with fear, but recognition. The end had come into view. The ruins stood like broken teeth against a whitening sky, the last stronghold of a centuries-old hunger. The hunters approached in silence, breath smoking in the cold. No trumpets, no omen, only the knowledge that if they faltered now, night would own the world again. Van Helsing descended first, no tremor in his hands, no haste in his steps. He moved through the stone throat of the castle as if descending into the root of evil itself, carrying not anger but a physician's exactness toward a patient that could not be healed, only ended. Far above the crypts, Mina stood rigid, eyes dilated with an unseen command. Her breath trembled as the master's will pressed against her mind like iron bars, yet something within her refused to bend, as though the remnant of her own name braced itself in defiance. From the dark, the three brides slipped forth, not walking but gliding, their faces bright with hunger and old promises. Their voices were velvet knives, coaxing, beckoning, offering release from fear in exchange for surrender. Van Helsing raised the crucifix and light spilled from it like a physical force. The brides recoiled with animal panic, arms thrown up against the brightness that did not burn flesh but memory of what they once were before they chose the dark. They dissolved to vapor, folding back into cracks and dust, leaving only the echo of their hunger. In the corner, a shattered mirror caught Mina's face, fractured into unrecognizable pieces, like someone half unmade by possession. At the coffin, Van Helsing worked with reverence more than fury, salt, scripture, sacrament. He was not desecrating a resting place, he was closing a wound in the world. Before the rite was finished, the lid of a nearby crate burst upward, and the Count rose, not like a corpse but like a thing awakened to defend its throne. His eyes were not mad, they were lucid, offended, sovereign. Steel flashed, and Quincy fell under a wound meant for another. Yet with what strength remained, he surged forward and drove the stake with the decisiveness of someone who knew there would be no second strike. The Count gave no final speech, no curse, he simply collapsed inward, like a mountain of centuries finally allowed to fall. Ash rose and drifted, indistinguishable from all the forgotten dead of history. Mina knelt beside Quincy, her hand closing over his as his pulse faded. Little, less, nothing. There was no triumph in the room, only the quiet price of ending evil. As the last ember of Dracula's power dissolved, Mina's brow cleared, as if an invisible seal had been lifted. She was not merely spared, she was returned to herself. When daylight finally struck the ash that had once been the Count, the ruin did not erupt or blaze, it simply accepted what was left of him. The light passed through what remained like through dust in a cathedral, and with it the invisible tether on Mina dissolved. She did not gasp or cry out, she merely breathed like someone waking from a years-long fever. When daylight finally struck the ash that had once been the Count, the ruin did not erupt or blaze, it simply accepted what was left of him. The light passed through what remained like through dust in a cathedral, and with it the invisible tether on Mina dissolved. She did not gasp or cry out, she merely breathed like someone waking from a years-long fever. They stood once more before leaving, backs to the wreckage, faces toward the road. The ruins behind them looked smaller now, as if evil shrinks the moment it is no longer feared. They did not speak vows or name the ordeal, they simply walked away, and that walking was its own liturgy of closure. Years later, beneath a gentler sky, a small family gathered at Lucy's grave, children who never knew the terror that preceded their lives. A single red rose was set on the stone, not as payment but remembrance, proof that horror does not have the last word when the living choose to remember with tenderness instead of fear. stand in the cold morning. They are fewer than when this hunt began. Faces missing. Names now carved in silence. Yet in their grief there is a hard, bright truth: evil is not immortal. It can be hunted. It can be cornered. It can be ended. The castle will crumble. The road here will vanish beneath snow and time. But somewhere, in the quiet turning of pages and the whisper of old fears, people will still speak of the Count who fed on blood and darkness, and of those who defied him in the final hour. This is not a tale of his power. It is a record of their courage. And as the sun climbs higher over Transylvania, night itself seems to hesitate. As if it remembers that, even in its deepest heart, there is always a place where the light gets in. Stand in the cold morning. They are fewer than when this hunt began. Faces missing. Names now carved in silence. Yet in their grief there is a hard, bright truth: evil is not immortal. It can be hunted. It can be cornered. It can be ended. The castle will crumble. The road here will vanish beneath snow and time. But somewhere, in the quiet turning of pages and the whisper of old fears, people will still speak of the Count who fed on blood and darkness, and of those who defied him in the final hour. This is not a tale of his power. It is a record of their courage. And as the sun climbs higher over Transylvania, night itself seems to hesitate. As if it remembers that, even in its deepest heart, there is always a place where the light gets in.